Okay, Chair, we're now live.
Thank you. I will ask each person present to confirm that they can hear and be heard. Where practicable, please also have your video switched on. We have the following members of the forum. So Beverly Blower.
Good morning, everybody. I confirm I can see and hear everybody.
Good morning. Dan Breary.
Yeah, all good here.
Oh, good morning, thank you. Alex Davis. Paul Deneen.
Yes, can be seen and heard. Thank you.
Nikki, sorry, that was an apology one. Nikki Gilbert.
Yes, I can see and hear, and as I said, when I'm in the room, I'll have camera on. Thank you.
Hope your flooding isn't bad this morning.
It's the after effects. It's
Same here, also just down the road from you in Leinster. Georgie Griffin. Sue Jenkins. Tim Knapp.
Good morning, all good here.
Thank you. Chris Lewandowski.
Good morning, all. Yes, I can both see and hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Gemma Martin.
Sian Line, substitute for Gemma Martin this morning. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Kathy Weston. Okay, officers that may be in attendance. Jen Priest.
I can see and hear you, Chair.
Thank you. Claire Bellis-Powley.
Confirmed, I'm here.
Thank you. Liz Farr.
Morning, everybody. Yes, I can see and hear, Chair. Thank you.
Ruth Griffiths. Hilary Jones.
Morning, everybody. Yes, I can see and hear everybody.
Morning. Louise Tanner.
Morning, everybody. Yes, I can see and hear. Thank you, Chair.
Rachel Sanders.
I think Rachel
Chair, she's dropped a note in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Rosalind Pither.
Hey, yeah, thank you very much. Can see and hear. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Councillor Ivan Powell.
Hi, everybody. Yes, thank you, Chair. See you here.
Thank you. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel, and a recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Please use the raise hand icon to indicate that you wish to speak, and please remember to lower your hand again after you have spoken. Where forum members are required to vote on an item, we will conduct an electronic vote. If there are problems with the electronic vote, I will ask each member in turn to indicate verbally if they are for, against, or abstaining. If a forum member has not been present for the whole of the discussion on an item due to technical failure, they should not vote on that item. Are there any questions about the procedures before we continue? Okay, thank you, everyone. So moving on to item 1, which is election of a chairperson for the ensuing year. I'll hand over to the clerk to present.
Thank you. The custom for Herefordshire Schools Forum is for the chairperson to serve 2 consecutive academic years. Alison Banner has confirmed her wishes to serve as chairperson for her 2nd term. I therefore ask the forum for a proposer, please.
I propose Alison Banner.
Thank you very much. And also a seconder.
I second Alison Banner.
Thank you. I've got Paul there. Lovely. Are there any other nominations? I see none. Okay, I will then proceed to the poll. So as a forum, we've not done this yet. Hopefully a pop-up will appear on your screen. If that doesn't happen, please refer to the chat and it will appear in the chat. So I'm just going to launch the poll. Okay, and if only members of the forum could please vote. So officers, if you could please refrain from voting.
It says on mine this feature isn't available yet. So
might just take its time to get through to you, possibly.
no, I voted, but it said I can't vote.
So you have voted, but it's saying you can't vote.
I've got the election bit. Underneath it says this feature isn't available yet in your version of Teams. We're working on it.
Right. Okay. So I'm okay. Okay, that's fine.
Shall I put mine in the message.
Fine. Okay. What I'd suggest we do then, should we go to a named vote? It was looking like this might be possible. So, Chair, I'm going to go for a named vote on this one. So if I just go through who we've got on the screen. So, Alison, you can actually vote for yourself on this. Alison Banner, we could.
I wasn't going to in case I couldn't, but yeah, happy to do it.
Okay. Beverly Blower.
Yes, definitely.
So that's 4, Alison. Dan Bury.
Yeah, I voted.
So 4 against or abstain. We're having to go to a name vote because the poll is unsuccessful.
4 then, please. 4.
Okay. Paul Deneen.
4.
Nikki Gilbert. Nikki, can you hear me? Okay, I'll move on from Nikki. Tim Knapp.
Yeah, 4, please.
Chris Lewandowski.
4, please.
Okay, and then we have our substitutes, Sean Lines.
Yes, 4, please.
And our substitute, Lynn Johnson.
Yes, 4.
Okay, so I believe that's unanimous then. So Alison Banner is re-elected as our chair. I will pass on to Alison to continue with the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move on to the next item, which is the election of a vice chairperson. Again, the custom is for the vice chair to serve for 2 years. Paul Jennings isn't present today. However, he has confirmed his willingness to serve for a 2nd year. So I propose Paul from the chair. Do we have a seconder for Paul as a vice chairperson?
Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. So we've got Bev Blower and also Paul Deneen to second Paul. Are there any other nominations? Okay, I can't see any other ones. So again, this now moves to the vote, which we'll do in the same way as we did for the chair. Clerk, please.
Yes, no problem. Okay, so this is to 4 against or abstain for Paul Jennings as vice chair. Alison Banner.
4.
Beverly Blower.
4.
Dan Breary.
4.
Paul Deneen.
4.
Nikki Gilbert.
4.
Have we got Sue Jennings? Sorry. No. Okay. Tim Knapp.
4.
Chris Lewandowski.
4.
And our substitutes, Lynn Johnson.
4.
And Sean Lines.
4.
Okay, so that's unanimous again, Chair.
Thank you. So that will mean Paul Jennings is our vice chairperson, confirmed into that role. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, which is apologies for absence. Can the clerk please confirm the apologies received, please?
Yes, Chair. So apologies received. We've got quite a few of those. So we've got Nikki Emmett, Richard Foster, Andy Gosling, Edward William, Paul Jennings, Hayley Manns, Gemma Martin, Rose Lloyd, and Sheila Taylor.
Okay, thank you, Clerk. Item 4 is named substitutes. Are there any named substitutes today?
Okay, and so we've got Lynn Johnson and also Sean Lines.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this morning, please? Okay, I can't see any hands. Is that correct, Clark?
Yes, I can't see any hands either.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Moving on to item 6, which is the minutes. So this item is to approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of July 2024. Are there any matters arising that aren't dealt with elsewhere on the agenda, please? Beverly Blower.
It's just a simple one thing, but my name is incorrect across the top.
Okay, thank you. I can see that the clerk's made a note of that. Okay, so can we now do the vote again, which I think we can't do on voting screen. And if you were not present at the last meeting, sorry, go on, Jen.
So sorry, Chair. I think that we could just have a show of hands on this one, just
Okay.
to agree that everyone's happy with the minutes.
Okay.
With the
If you're
amendment
present-
to Bev Lower.
Okay, thank you. If you were not present at the last meeting, then you would abstain from that vote. So can we have a show of hands to approve the minutes, please?
Okay, Chair, I think we can approve that. Bev, you still got your hand up. Is that from the? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So on now to item 7, which is National Schools Funding Formula 2025-26 update. So the purpose of this item is to provide an update to the forum on national school funding issues, including the recommendations of the budget working group on the Herefordshire schools budget for 2025-26. So I call upon our senior finance business partner, Claire Bellis-Powley, to introduce the report.
Sure. Are you happy if I share my screen to show the reports? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Share my screen. So I've shared my screen now. Can everyone see the reports? Okay,
Yes.
so I had an introduction, but just to introduce myself, so I'm the new senior finance business partner for Herefordshire for child social care and education. So I've been in position 2 months now, and children's social care and education is new to me. So I will endeavour to answer your questions today, but if there's anything I can't answer, I will get back to you on it. So yes, if we start with agenda item number 7, so it's the National Schools Funding Formula. So there's 2 recommendations I'd like the Schools Forum to consider. The first recommendation is that we use, so that for the 25-25-6 budget process, we use the 24-25 budget process. And for the second thing I'd like the Schools Forum to consider is whether we do a consultation with schools, and I will outline that more as we come to it. So if we look at the first recommendation, so the reason we're bringing this to the forum is because usually in July, we have received the National Schools Funding Formula by now. So what happens with that is that we receive the high level block information, such as the schools block information, the high needs, and the central block information. So it's not at school level at that point, but it forms a very important first stage of our planning process. So why haven't we received that? And the reason is because we had a change of government in July, and there's been a delay in the announcement. Now, the ESA have announced that they are going to give us the National Schools Funding Formula, but not until after the 30th of October. So I hope you can see that that actually poses a risk to our budget process, because the National Funding Formula forms the first stage. The second stage is then the schools consultation, and then that nicely leads on to December, where we would receive the authority planning tool from the department, which would start to outline the budgets at individual school level. Then what would happen would be that we would take approvals to the school forum, which we've done every year. And then usually in March, we would then have some detailed schools level individual budgets. So if we don't have the national funding formula at the beginning, it poses a risk at the end of the process. So what can we do to mitigate that risk? So on the 4th of October, we took a proposal to the budget working group. And we're proposing that in the absence of any deadlines or any information, that we use the approach used in 24-25, and we use that approach for our budgeting process in 25-26. So what does that mean though? What did we do in 24-25? So just to refresh ourselves, so in 24-25 we used the national funding formula values, and we would like to do that again for 25-26. We also used the maximum permitted minimum funding guarantee of 0.5%, and kind of digging through the files, the maximum funding guarantee we used was 2.45, and we would look to do that again in 25-26. Another thing that was successful in 24-25 was that we maximised the block transfer process. So we transferred 0.5% from the schools block into the high needs block, and we used that to fund the SEND protection scheme. So just to outline, the SEND protection scheme is a scheme which funds schools that take a higher than normal average amount of SEND pupils, and that SEND protection scheme means that we can fund those pupils in order to meet their needs. It's very successful, you know, speaking to schools, they couldn't take those children without that funding in place. So that's something we'd like to roll forward for 25-26. Another thing that we would like to roll forward from 25-26, from 24-25 into 25-26 would be the dedelegations. So the dedelegations that we currently have in 24-25 are listed in their schools forum committee meeting from January 2024, and we did share those with the budget working group. We will put an annual increase onto those. At the moment we can't announce anything on that until we have our funding blocked, but we'd like the physicality to roll forward those dedelegations that we already have in place. Another thing that was successful for 24-25 is that we had strategies in place to avoid the DSG deficit escalating any further. And of course, is something we would take into consideration in our 25-26 strategies. So we took this to the budget working group and they approved that we should use the 24-25 budget framework. They said it was well received and effective, and so it would be prudent to use this for 25-26. So I just want to open this up to the schools forum now and ask them the same question and get their view and approval on this. Should Herefordshire Council use the same approach for 25-26 we use for 24-25?
Okay, thank you, Claire. Before we move to the vote, are there any comments or questions that members would like to ask this morning? Nikki.
Yeah, in principle, I think we have a budget working group for a reason, and there are representatives. I would just like somebody in the future to be able to clarify the dedelegation aspect. For context, I represent the special schools on this board, and the national funding formula is not something that applies to us. And so there's always this aspect of dedelegation, which is referring to the national funding formula process, but special schools aren't subject to that. So when we are then expected to pay and buy back things, we haven't actually had it dedelegated in the first place. So I'd like some clarity in the future, please, on why that happens, because we aren't subject to the same arrangements yet. We are still expected to conform to the dedelegation and buy things back, and we're not even given any money in the first place towards it. So it's not the place for now, but I would like that to be looked at and brought back to special schools, please, because every single penny counts, and whereas we don't have a national funding formula, we are treated the same as all the other schools in Herefordshire in this process.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. Claire, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we will look to get a response back on that. And yes, thank you for raising it to us. Okay, so I'll move.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just checking there's no more hands. I've got to go through. Okay. All right. Okay, no more at this point, Claire, so back to you.
Sure. Do we want to do a vote on whether we want to use this approach, or are we okay just to move on?
No, we would need to vote. I wasn't sure if you had any more comments that you wanted to put there. So Liz Farr, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Nothing further from me, Claire, thank you.
Okay, same question for Rachel Sanders.
Yep, nothing further for me to add.
Okay, thank you. So now we will move to vote on the following recommendations. A show of hands again. So this one is for those in favour for the Schools Forum to review the budget approach for setting the school's 2025-26 budget to be in line with the approach taken in 2024-25, as Claire has just outlined. So if you're in favour of that, could you raise your hand, please?
Yeah, Chair, I'm seeing a unanimous hands up there. I think we can set that as approved and move on to the next item. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the second point for Schools Forum to vote on was referenced by Claire, and this is that the Schools Forum is to provide a view on consultation with schools as outlined in paragraph 5. Is there more to add there, Claire, about that one before we vote? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
I'd just like to outline it a little bit. So, I mean, I've already explained it really in that the national funding formula forms the first stage of our budgeting process, and that naturally falls onto the consultation. And usually the consultation would contain some high level information about what that national funding formula contains. So, you know, first of all, there's the delay in the timeline. And secondly, we don't have the information to bring to the consultation. Now, we took this to the budget working group who said, you know, the process shouldn't take place. Their reason was really that it was because of poor response from schools in previous years. And others said, well, perhaps we could do it, not in the format that we previously had. So the previous format is printing out a form and filling it in. And they suggested something a little bit more swish, such as a Microsoft online form. So we didn't really reach a conclusion at the budget working group. So yes, at this point, I'd like to open it up to the Schools Forum to consider, should the consultation take place? And if so, what information would you like us to bring and what format should it be in?
Okay, thank you, Claire. Are there any, before we move to a vote, any thoughts or any questions on that? Paul Denning.
First of all, to say welcome to Herefordshire, Claire. And secondly, is any other good practice on this particular area? It seems to me eminently sensible to have a online form. There's Survey Monkey, there's a whole range of quick responses. It all depends what's the aim of the survey and whether or not there's a, you know, and head teachers are exceptionally busy. So if I'm just trying to think whether there's something which is simple and straightforward, that's not going to take ages to do, and you get the responses back that are reasonable and appropriate and proportionate. So I just wondered if there's any other counties or similar activities elsewhere where it's been successful.
So, I mean, we could certainly put in place a Microsoft online form, and you mentioned Survey Monkey there, so that's something we could do. I have had a look at what other local authorities are doing at the moment, because obviously they're in the same position. They haven't received the national funding formula, and a lot of them aren't doing the consultation. But, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean we have to follow that. And if it's useful, we will. The only information I think that we can bring is what I'm bringing you here, such as, OK, this is going to be our budget approach. But I'm not sure, like you said, head teachers are busy, whether it's something that, you know, is worth taking their time up with at this point. But let's see what other members have to say.
Okay, thank you. Nikki.
Yeah, I think we do need to consult. I'm happy with an online, but I think we would be setting ourselves up to be criticised massively. Whilst we're the definition of consult doesn't necessarily mean taking people's opinions. It basically says this is what we're going to do. But if head teachers haven't been consulted, then they have every right to say, you know, when we've sent the forms out, yes, we know there's a very low return, but at least they've been sent out. If the decision not to consult is made, then I think then democracy is not being proven to be you know, undertaken. So I would say yes, and via an online form, then people can choose whether or not they respond, but they've had the choice.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. Chris Lewandowski.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the last two speakers. It must be essential that schools are consulted. It's part of a democratic process. So if you can do it online in a simpler form, fine, but consultation is essential. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Breary.
Thank you. I'm just in agreement with everybody. Paul raised some very valid points. I generally respond to this every year, but I have had years where it's been too frenetic and there's so much writing to take in, certainly when I wasn't on the budget working group, that I didn't end up responding. So I think it should be done. It's important consultation, but it needs to be sort of easily manageable to respond to.
Okay, thank you. Tim Knapp.
Hi, Chair. Yeah, I would agree with everything that's been said so far. I would also want to stress that the consultation is meaningful and has a purpose and isn't just being done for the sake of it. Yes, democracy does need to be enacted, but it also has to have value.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other points before we move to the vote? Okay, so we'll now vote on the following recommendation, and that is for schools, the to be consultation with schools as just outlined by Claire and following the discussion that we've had. So if you are in favour of a consultation with schools, could you raise your hand, please?
Yes, Chair, I think that's unanimous that they do consult. So I think we can move on to the next item.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, everyone. Item 8 is the High Needs Funding and Dedicated Schools Grant Management Plan. The purpose of the item being to report on the pressures facing the high needs budget and on progress delivering the deficit management plan. So I call upon our Senior Finance Business Partner, again, Claire Bellis-Powley, to introduce the report.
Great, thank you for that. So yes, as Alison just said, so I'm going to talk about the high needs funding. I'm going to talk about the deficits that we currently have in Herefordshire, and I'm going to bring in about the DSG management plan tool as well, which will help us manage that deficit. So moving on, so if I go through the recommendations, so we would like to the schools forum to review the high needs 23-24 final outcome budget. We would like the schools forum to review the high needs 24-25 forecast outturn. And on the last point, I'm going to take you through some of the mitigating actions that we already have in place to mitigate our deficit, and some mitigating actions that we have in the pipeline on top of what we're already doing. And bring that all together, I'm going to talk about the DSG management plan, which helps us manage our deficit. So moving down in the key considerations section, just to summarise this, I think the main point here is that, you know, we did bring the deficit to the forum in the financial year 21-22. It was very, very minimal and small then, and unfortunately, you know, we are in financial year 24-25, and it has risen considerably. So we will start with the year where we had sort of a main increase to that deficit, and that is year 23-24. So the high needs DSG block overspent in that year by 5.1 million. Now, bringing forward the small deficit that occurred prior to this financial year, we had cumulative DSG deficit at the end of 31st of March 24, 6.1 million. So what happened to bring us forth a 5.1 million deficit in 23-24? So the main reasons for overspend are out of county schools, which contributed 2.3 million. We had special school top-ups, which contributed 0.7 million, and then 0.8 million on school top-ups. So bringing forth 6.1 million into 24-25, it nicely leads on to 24-25. So you'll remember on the 12th of April 2024, the Schools Forum recommended a high needs budget of 29.7 million. And we noted then that we had a funding gap of 6.5 million. So we knew we didn't have enough funding for this year. Now we're nearly halfway through the year, and as at the end of August, so that period 5, we call it, that pressure has increased from 6.5 up to 7.6 million. So if we add that to 6.1 million brought forward, that would take us to a forecast at the moment cumulative deficit of 13.7 million. So what does that mean for a council when we have a DSG deficit? So at the moment, councils across the country, and it is across the country, this isn't isolated to Herefordshire, almost all councils at the moment have a deficit, with Herefordshire being one of the smaller deficits across the UK. And at the moment, what it means is that we can ring fence that deficit, and essentially it's not included in the council's results and we don't have to fund it. Now, unfortunately, this revoked in March 2026. And we do then have to include it in our financial position and essentially fund it. Now, I think the annual report from 23-24 that the external auditors wrote sort of sums up what that means, in that it represents an extreme financial risk to the council, and that it recommends that in order to manage this DSG deficit, the council needs to work with schools and other stakeholders and partners to ensure that this expenditure is reduced. So what are we going to do? How are we going to manage this deficit? So what I'm going to introduce here is the DSG management plan. So this is the tool that the ESFA have given us. All councils who have a deficit across the country have to fill this in, and you also have to fill it in if your surplus has significantly reduced in the year. Now, we brought this to the schools forum in 2023, and obviously almost 2 years on, both finance and the service have done considerable work on this plan. So what the tool does is it has 4 years of actuals in, so it's 2020 through to 2024. So of course what that's doing in Herefordshire's case is bringing forth a deficit. And then the tool then forecasts from 2024 through to 2030. And so we have quite a long-term forecast then in front of us. We have to put in mitigating plans in order to manage the deficit. So this report details, there's quite a lot of detail on all the mitigations that we have in place, but I'll just sort of summarise a few of them for you. So mitigations that we have in place currently and that are working in our actuals and that we will keep in our forecast are things such as the Nurture Group, Wide Marsh Explorers and Autism Hubs. And things that we're going to put in the future in our forecast, so things that we're going to do on top of the things that are already working for us, are, we have an approval for a new free school, which will increase local authority special school places. We're also going to repurpose buildings as well, and to increase our local authority special school places. Now, the thinking behind that is if we increase our LA special school places, we can reduce our independent provider provision, which is driving up our costs at the moment. So, as I said, it's very detailed, some of the strategies here, but that's sort of in a nutshell what we're going to put into our plan. So just to finish off, I'm just going to bring forth 3 considerations that we took to the budget working group about this and get the schools forum's view on it. So first consideration is I've just described some of the mitigations that we have in our DSG management plan, both mitigations now and both mitigations in the future. And we asked the budget working group if there were any other mitigations that they could think of that we don't already have in place or in the pipeline. And they said that nothing further than what is already being done could be noted. So we just want to take this consideration to the schools forum to see if they have any ideas about any further mitigations.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Are there any thoughts or comments or questions that any members wish to put forward? Paul Deneen.
Can I just ask about how we are influencing the new government? Obviously, there's a different approach now, and I think it's important that we seek our support from our local MPs to bang the drum for Herefordshire, because I think there's a tendency, sadly, that the rural shire areas may lose out even further. So I think it's really important that we set out the position in Herefordshire, which is to look after the needs of the most vulnerable, and that the funding has been woefully inadequate, and that we are seeking support for, you know, the most vulnerable. And I think, you know, the actual budget is up next week, I think, so we may get some further information then. But I do think we need to start to, you know, utilise as much support as we can nationally to continue the campaign to get, you know, the requisite funding for special needs. And I'm hugely supportive of, you know, Nikki as well with the special schools, because I think it would be far better if you know, everybody knew exactly what was happening. So therefore my suggestion is we need to incorporate our MPs into any plan that we might have.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I can see, Liz, you've got your hand up. Would you like to respond? You're still on mute, I think, Liz.
Gosh, rookie error. Apologies. Thank you, Chair. I agree with all of those comments made. In terms of being a lead officer role in this space, I meet with the department regularly, and there's not a meeting that goes by where I don't raise the issues around finance in the SEND space. And also I would add that lack of transparency and forward planning from the department. So as a local authority, we never know when there will be rounds of rebuilding or free school programmes, and that makes it very difficult to plan strategically. I make sure that our strategic partners are very sighted on the issues that our schools are facing in this space, and I know that we've had strong support from Councillor Powell, who's on the call today, in representing our position. And I'm also meeting with our local MP shortly to make sure that they are well cited on the issues that we and Schools Forum face in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Councillor Powell, I can see that you have got your hand up. Would you like to comment?
Liz's information was partly what I was going to say, so that's helpful, and I'll continue to talk to Liz and the forum about representations that I can make locally. But just to inform those who may not be aware, both the County Councils Network and the Local Government Association have recently written to the new Chancellor, raising a range of matters to do with pressures on council budgets, but specifically including the matters of sensible levels of financing for special educational needs. So County Councils Network and Local Government Association have done that at a national level. I'm in the process of bringing Herefordshire's position together. We are little old Herefordshire, but I feel it's my responsibility to represent Herefordshire and write, and I copy in both of the MPs to that. So just a bit of additional information for you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Chris Lewandowski.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions that are related. First question, in the table on page 22, section 7, it shows that the out-of-county schools placements is 2.3 million, which is by far the largest element. Approximately how many pupils is that catering for? And following on from that, of those pupils, how many is it anticipated could have their needs met by the new build special school that's coming in 2026, i.e. bringing them back in-house? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Rachel, do you want, Claire, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I don't have that information to hand, but it's certainly something we can look into, unless any of my other colleagues have anything that they can help with on that.
Okay, thank you, Claire. So Clark, can you make a note of that for a future meeting to return to? Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
Liz, I know you have commented. Are there any other comments you'd like to make at that point?
I don't know the numbers off by heart in response to that question. We do have information, so I'm happy to share that. For all of our, I can answer the second question. We are very mindful, Chris, in all of our sufficiency work around mitigating those independent school places, which are predominantly out of county, and bringing children back to Herefordshire by increasing our own provision. So you'll be aware of the projects that we've run up until this point and those that are in the pipeline. And we would expect to see over time a reduction in independent school places as our own provisions grow.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Claire, is there any further information to present?
Yes, so I'll just go through the second budget working group consideration that again I'd like to bring to this forum. So we said to the budget working group, we discussed if there are any further cost savings that could be achieved by schools. Now the budget working group quite keen to come back to say that no further cost savings could be made without impeding quality, and it was also noted that definitely more funds were needed for strategies and training, and that nicely correlated with a strategy that the council are already putting in place, which is send alternative change procedure. So again, it's just a question to the forum: are there any further cost savings that could be made or achieved by schools?
Okay, thank you, Claire. Are there any comments, questions, thoughts that anyone would like to put forward? Okay, no hands. Oh no, Nikki Gilbert.
Sorry, I'm just going to state the obvious, but I think somebody needs to. There's absolutely no cost savings that can be made. Schools are unsafe already. Last year we used up the last of our, and I'm sure it's just me, but we used up the last of our carry forward, and it's the first year we've submitted a deficit budget, and it's going to be the same again because we have to keep our young people safe. So I'll just speak on behalf of pretty much every colleague. I think that there are absolutely no cost savings that can be made.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll just bring forth the last consideration now, which will finish me. But so we took the budget working group. There's going to be an internal audit review, self-assessment of schools coming up to identify where financial controls could be strengthened. And we asked the budget working group if this would be helpful for schools. Now they were very keen and said yes, it would be helpful, but as long as it was manageable, targeted and well defined. So it's just a question I'd like to take forward to the forum now, in that, would this be helpful for schools?
Okay, thank you, Claire. Nikki.
I mean, we do the SFBS every year. We do internal audits every single year. And head teachers spend every day trying to make sure that we have best value. So I wouldn't want to put any more pressure on business managers when their job is already trying to have three examples. We do it every single year. We have to return our SFBS form to the governors and then to the local authority. So I'm not quite sure what that would look like, because if it's not some, we already do that.
Thanks, Nikki. Claire, you look like you're going to respond.
No, I don't have anything further to add to it, but again, we can certainly add some flesh to it at a later point as to how that would look if it comes about.
Okay, thank you. Rachel.
Yeah, just to say that would be an opportunity to gather best practice, and it could really be informed by whatever would be useful from schools. Equally, it could act to provide some assurance. It could take the form of whatever would be most helpful, but it's certainly not meant to be a further administrative burden in terms of increasing that requirement to respond to audit. But I think it might be a useful way to identify good practice and provide that valuable assurance.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there any other comments, questions or thoughts? Nikki.
Again, sorry. I think the principle of an audit, certainly for maintained schools, is limited and restricted, because certainly in respect of service level agreements and insurances and things like that, the element of choice to go cheaper is not there. because we are all tied to Hoople, we are all tied to the council's insurance. So it would need to take very different approaches, bearing in mind that, you know, we can't look around for HR support. We can't look around because we're a maintained school. So you need a greater understanding really of the differences between academies and maintained schools before you start setting up that process.
Thank you, Nikki. Dan Breary.
It is tricky. You can look around for different services. I certainly do as a maintained school. So I don't necessarily use Hoople for everything. I do for some things, but for legal support and things like that, I use a different company. So we're not tied to that. I'm not being difficult because it's you know, it's not a great deal of saving sometimes, but it is possible.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's agenda item 8 finished now. So I'll stop sharing and we can move on to the next.
Okay, so we do have 3 items for recommendations for vote based on that particular item 8. So we'll move on to vote on those recommendations. Show of hands vote again. So we've got that the high needs 2023-24 final outturn budget position is to be reviewed by the schools forum. Are we to confirm we're voting for a separate review, or are you putting forward that review was the discussion that we just held? That was to Claire.
That review was the discussion that we've just had, Chair. So basically, I suppose we're just noting that the schools forum has been updated on all those recommendations. Are they're happy with what's been discussed? So you could take those on block if you'd like. Just raise a hand to say you're happy that it's been reviewed and noted by the forum.
Okay, so there are 3 there then that we have just reviewed. So in discussion that the high needs 2023-24 final outturn budget position was reviewed, that the high needs 2024-25 forecast outturn be reviewed, and agree that regular budget monitoring reports are presented to future schools forums. And we also have the review of the mitigation actions used in preparing the deficit management plan and managing the DSG deficit. So that was for schools forum to highlight and identify any further mitigations that could be taken. So the vote is to underline that discussion and review has happened. So if you are in agreement that has taken place and you're happy with the items have been given a chance to be put forward, members have commented, please could you raise your hand?
I missed that bit because I was out of the room, so I'm going to abstain on that if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we move on to item 9, which is the work programme for 2024-25. The purpose being to review this and to ask members if you have any comments or suggestions for the work programme for this coming year. Paul Deneen.
Can I just ask, is there any mood music from government about the future schools forum at all, or schools fora? Because obviously there was, you know, it's a new government coming in. They tend to sort of start things or drop things. I just wondered if there was anything you've picked up, Liz.
Nothing all that I've picked up yet. I think they're still in a very much a finding their way scenario. I'm expecting announcements from the government more on this space, but at the moment we've had very vague indications and nothing particular at all about schools forum.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or suggestions? Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll now move to close the meeting. Thank you all for attending. Call the meeting to a close. The next meeting is on Friday, the 24th of January 2025. Clark, can I have confirmation that the live stream has stopped, please?